Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. You guys ready to get started?
Sure.
Feel good? Okay, awesome. So I want to start by thanking all of you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited for today's presentation, obviously, and of course, the conversation that we get into inevitably afterwards. But I'd like to kind of rewind and just let you guys in on a little bit behind why we started this webinar, a little bit about our motivation to do it. And long story short, at the onset of COVID-19 and the shelter in place and things like that, TJ, Vicky, Shannon, and myself wanted to offer people a platform or a forum of support. And it had been something that we had been kind of kicking around for a long time of doing in the community. And then, but there's a lot of barriers to presenting for communities and things like that. And then all of a sudden, Zoom kind of made it a lot easier. So that's why we're here. That's why we're doing it, is to offer support to people that need it during these very interesting times that we're in. So that's why we're here. A couple little housekeeping things. I do record these webinars, so if you do have to jam early or you can't stay till the end, that's totally okay. Let me know, and I'll make sure you get the video. And we'll also post it on Facebook, so you can rewatch it there if you're interested in that. Also, if you'd like to ask a question, our favorite part of this webinar is the Q&A. So make sure that you use the Q&A function rather than asking questions in the chat, just because I want to make sure that I don't miss anybody's questions. Okay, so make sure you do it in the Q&A. That way they all get answered. And yeah, that being said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Miller. I work with TJ at Conscious Recovery, of course, and also at an outpatient program in Los Gatos called Embodied Recovery. And we've been doing a lot of Zoom tours. So if you're interested in touring the facility with me on Zoom, let me know in the chat and we'll get you scheduled. And let's see. Shannon, you ready for your intro?
Sure.
All right, it's all you.
My short and sweet intro after being in the field since, I don't know when, maybe way too many years to say. So I'm Shannon Clay and I work with Discovery Behavioral Health. We have dual diagnosis treatment for adults and adolescents, adolescent mental health and eating disorder treatment at multiple locations in the US, including California. And I've just generally been working in addiction and mental health treatment for actually 34 years. Oh my gosh. And I love bringing resources to humans for healing. And so that's my passion for this webinar and why I wanted to participate in it. And I do know Lori Jean and her work, and I really love the Glass House a lot. So I'm encouraging everybody that's on to ask questions in the chat as we're going along instead of waiting to the end, because Lori Jean will address them. And it's really a different kind of work. Excellent for individuals and families, of course. And those of you that work in treatment know that family work is very needed, and also the resources are really slim. So super grateful to have Lori Jean from our very own North Bay, really northern or San Francisco Bay Area, we could say that, not really North Bay, but anyway, so thank you for being with us, Lori Jean. We really appreciate you, and thank you everybody for coming to another webinar with us.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Vicky, you want to try and do your intro from the car, dude? No,
Yeah,
she looks frozen. Oh, wait.
Hi, can you hear me?
No, you're cutting out pretty bad, Vic. Oh, there you go.
All right. I'm Vicki Lucas with Equanimity Interventions. Thank you, Lori Jean, for joining us. I was just going to skip out today because I'm on the road, but I couldn't do it. I just can't wait to hear you. And I think Jeremy and Shannon pretty much wrapped up what we do. And obviously Equanimity Interventions, I'm an interventionist. We provide transports and case management, and I'm on a bumpy road if you can't tell. Anyways, I'll send it back to you, Jeremy. Thanks.
I was going to ask how bumpy that road was, Vicky. That is so funny. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here from the road, Vic. And TJ, you ready?
I'm always ready. Thank you, Jeremy. Welcome, everyone. So incredibly grateful to be here for another webinar. And I'm the CEO and the creator of Conscious Recovery. If you don't know what Conscious Recovery is, 2 weeks from now, visit our new website. No, we have a website. Jeremy Miller is the amazing man behind the scenes launching a brand new site, but it's consciousrecovery.com. You'll see what I was able to create on my own and then come back in 2 weeks and look at what the master will create. But conscious recovery is a modality of treatment that assists someone in getting down to the deeper root causes that actually drive the addiction. And the foundational principle of conscious recovery is that underneath all addictive behavior is a whole and perfect being, or an essential self that is whole and perfect, which is a perfect segue into my excitement and my gratitude for Lori Jean Glass and the excitement that she's here with us. Lori Jean, I know you know this, but I feel such a deep heart connection with you. And for a period of time when I was working full-time in residential treatment, I had a vision that every single, at the time it was women because she was only doing women in her program, every single woman that came to treatment halfway through the treatment episode went and spent a week or 10 days or any time they could with Lori Jean, because of the power of her work and the depth of it. And there's such congruency for me in our approach and in recognizing the spiritual wholeness of a person and really helping someone not just look at their behaviors and their symptoms, but really getting down at a soul level and doing deep healing. And that's why I love you, Lori Jean. As you know, I've sent you so many clients, and every single one of them have come out saying, oh my gosh, I've waited all of my life for these experiences. So I just want to say thank you for your profound work. And so I'm excited about your presentation. And I think I'm going to lead us in a brief meditation now before we start. So I invite you, if it's appropriate, Vicki, you're not driving, so even you can gently close your eyes. And we take a nice deep conscious breath together. Simply allowing ourselves now to drop down into that place of inner stillness, connecting with that essential beingness, that deeper reality that's beyond the world of appearances, beyond our personality. Becoming aware of that inner light that you are, that core vibration, that beingness. So how grateful I am to know that we are indeed blessed today. We are coming together by divine appointment to listen to the profound words of Lori Jean Glass. And so what I know to be true is that every word she speaks is spoken from this deep essential truth, and we, the listeners, receive it with an open heart and open mind and open ear, filled with curiosity about how we can assist our clients and ourselves to shifting into a life filled with more love, more compassion, more purpose. So we just take about 30 seconds in the silence together to anchor that truth. And then we gently begin to bring our awareness back into this time and space. And as it feels right for you, I invite you to gently open your eyes.
Thank you so much, TJ. It's always so good to start with the meditation and anchor. And also thank you for that added pressure on the website build. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Lori Jean, who is an educator, a mentor, relationship coach, and public speaker, offering solutions for people having relationship challenges. She is current, passionate, and determined to help others. She works diligently to repair and restore relationships, both personal and in the workplace. She is a trained interventionist and a certified relationship professional and bereavement coach. She's facilitated trainings to help clinicians see a different perspective when diagnosing and treating process addictions, love addiction, love avoidance, sex addiction, and codependency. She is the CEO and founder of Pivot, which is a relational alignment group, and also created the Pivot Process, which is a curriculum created to help people repair and restore relationships. Pivot is comprised of certified and trained coaches and therapists who help individuals, couples, families, and businesses. Lori Jean was also the executive director of clinical operations for Five Sisters Ranch until the founder retired. She founded and opened the Glass House, which is a residential workshop program designed for individuals, couples, and families who want to take a deep dive into the pivot process to achieve immediate relational repair and growth. Lori Jean, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Aw, thank you. Thank you for, it's always so interesting to hear somebody read your bio. You know? Anyway, thank you for that. And I'm really honored to be here today. And I was telling Shannon and TJ and Jeremy before we got started today, I wasn't sure if I disclosed this, but I think I need to. I caught severe food poisoning 2 days ago. And so I'm just still coming out of that process. So I invite you all to kind of go with me on this journey and know that I will be speaking perfectly imperfect as I nurse myself back to wholeness. Yeah, wow. My heart's just full right now. I really appreciated that meditation, TJ. And what I know is that I don't know who can see a video, but I've got hummingbirds all over the back of my office, my office bulletin board. And I love what you're doing with conscious recovery. I think it's so important. It's so important. And we think a lot alike in that context. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is I think just a little bit about the work that I do, why I do it, and what it is. I think that would be beneficial. So about a little over a year ago, I released my first book. It's called #HealthyAdult. And that was really, such a pivotal moment in my life, because about 15 years ago, I set out on a quest to help people learn how to attach to other people more securely. My book came out right when a relationship was ending for me. And, it starts disclosing a suicide attempt that I had back in 1997. And I thought long and hard about whether or not I wanted to open a book with that, because I knew it would really mess up my dating life forever. But what was more important was being real. And the truth of the matter is I love what TJ said about being born and being whole. When I was born, like everybody, I was about as whole as we get to be. And, I had a lot of childhood trauma, like probably a lot of you on this call today. And for years, I spent time after time after time trying to have experiences that would help me manage and tolerate these feelings that lived inside of me that sometimes were too much or too complex. And what I did was I would latch on to anything that would help me connect to others so I could feel a part of. And oftentimes that would end up leaving me abandoned, neglected, feeling not enough all over again. And it was this perpetual cycle. It's like people that go to 12-step, they talk about the vicious cycle. People talk about, trauma bonding and repeating that cycle. There's all these different conversations about how people repeat cycles. And what I can tell you is that individually, we all do what we do, and we all repeat what we repeat because we're drawn to what's familiar regardless of merit. So what happened for me is that I have what clinicians say is attachment disorder. And attachment disorder can also many times be overlooked and classified as a process addiction. And oftentimes a process addiction, when treated, can leave somebody feeling very resistant to the behavior, and therefore they're just repeating that cycle of being disorderly attached. So when I decided to kind of go underneath this quest that I was on, I decided to leave my image consulting job, which I was very successful in, and just really set out to try to help other people. And what I didn't want was I didn't want to keep, well, let me, I get to be really mindful of how I say this. So I'm going to restart right now. You know, I believe that we overassess and undertreat in our industry. I believe that wholeheartedly. And oftentimes I'm met with a lot of pushback when I say that. And I don't mean that to disregard the assessment process. The assessment process is crucial. What I'm speaking to is once someone is assessed, or there's a problem indicated that is assessed, or there is maybe a diagnosis or a label or something to connect it to, oftentimes we stop there. And because we stop there, we don't see the multiple complexities underneath that. And then we end up confusing these people that we're trying to help, who are wearing multiple different labels, and they don't know what to do. When I was 37, after I had my bottom, I was told when I was coming out of that, looking to breathe again, that I suffered from something called love addiction. And what that did to me was put me in a tailspin. And the reason why it put me in a tailspin was because I had spent years of feeling like I didn't belong. My country western song, and I refer to it that way because I love country music. You know, my father drowned when I was a little girl. I have sexual abuse in my history. My mom used alcohol to manage that trauma and ended up killing herself when I was a teenager, in my late teens. So all of that, in addition to more trauma that I don't really want to share because it's deep and personal, and I want to honor anybody who might have a pain body wound get activated by my trauma, is the bottom line is this. The bottom line was I was not set up because of all that trauma to connect securely to other people. I was absolutely, but if you met me, you would never know that. You would have never known that. You know, I was popular in high school. I had lots of friends. I worked so hard to get other people to not see my pain. I worked so hard to make it look like everything was okay. And, when I had my bottom, when I was coming out of that, when I was told I had this thing called love addiction, I'll never forget. I had this feeling that day, and it was, this isn't the right term. This is not the right term. And what is it that I have? And so I started doing some research. I started talking to more people. I got a really good clinician that was, knew a lot about attachment disorder. And probably a lot of you on this call know him. Oh, I'm getting emotional, but Richard Lipfield really saved my life. And he's the one that got me to really look into and understand why I was so disorderly attached. And so we took the label off it. We started getting curious about who I am, how I saw myself. We started looking at the appropriate internal boundaries that would create connections, not block people off. We started looking at my developmental psychology, which is how my childlike self is so incredibly opposite of my adolescent individuating self, that was the basis of the complexities, and then who I was choosing to be as an adult as a result of that. And that really was a turning point for me when I started going into a think tank and developing the pivot process. So the pivot process is really an individualized system that gets people to take a look at how they view themselves in relationships with self and others from what we call the whole perspective. And then it has multiple layers added on that to help people go through this journey so they can actually go through it in 3 to 6 months and see the bigger picture of who they actually are and how they actually are attaching and why. so they don't feel so disempowered. They feel empowered so they can move forward and have healthier connections within themselves. So that's a little bit about that. And I don't want to make this sound like a pivot ad because that's just not who I am, for those of you that know me. But I also want to make it interesting. So yeah, that's kind of like what got me started in this, you know, and for those of you who have kind of been alongside me on this journey, I started talking about the crazy train before I called it pivot, because I wanted, in fact, I believe so wholeheartedly in that concept of the crazy train that I actually trademarked it. So Ozzy has it for music and LJ has it for psychology. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted people to learn to just know that they're not crazy, that the behavior looks crazy. That's why people are mirroring back to them. There's a little plug for my psychodrama background. They're mirroring back to them what they're seeing and what they're learning. So, you know, people will look crazy. You know, people will look crazy when they're acting out this behavior to try to manage and tolerate their feelings without even realizing why. You know, like so many times people will call me and say, LJ, I do not know why so-and-so went back with so-and-so. Like, don't they see that this person is an addict? Don't they see that this person is abusive? Don't they see that this person isn't healthy for them? And you know what? No, they don't see it. Because what they're trying to do is win. They're trying to take what didn't work and make it right so they can have a corrective experience. And I'm looking at this list of people on this call, and I know probably all of you understand that concept of corrective experience. You know, that's why so many people go and they sought that, you know, they're seeking out this different experience with the same kind of energy that they're used to having. And it makes it really problematic. So when I started talking about the crazy train, people started really hearing what I was saying because they were able to kind of understand the behavior, because it was behavior. It wasn't the soul of who the person actually is. That's not what was bottoming them out, you know. So that's kind of a little bit about me and a little bit about healthy adult. And the concept of healthy adult came when I would meet people like TJ. I would meet people that were striving to help people have a higher consciousness. And so my thinking is, well, if we've got developmental psychology and we talk about those parts of self so deeply, thank you, Bradshaw, for the inner child work, and all the other people that talk about the adolescent self, although I don't think there's enough conversation about that. And then we look at becoming an adult. Well, many people have a lot of experiences in their adult life that's very problematic. So if they're going to have a higher level of consciousness, how can we make that a developmental part too? How can we build on that? How can we gift people with that concept of, wow, I'm in my healthy adult. This is what I need to do now, when they feel those other parts of self emerging. You know, I had someone ask me once about these developmental parts work that we do at Pivot, and they said, you know, it's kind of like you're telling people they have multiple personalities, and you know, yeah. That's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing, because those parts of self are way stronger than we are willing to admit. Like, have you ever been somewhere, like been to a party or been to a networking event, and you're sitting by someone and you can tell they are so deregulated, and what's coming out of their mouth, they sound like they're 5 or 6 years old. Probably they've had a pain body wound get activated. Probably they're in a lot of pain. Probably they need our help, our support, not gossip, which is what this industry unfortunately does too much of. Like, this person's suffering and we need to help this person. Or you get a call from somebody that you think you know really well, and in 1 week they have moved, left their husband or wife, and quit their job, like in 1 week. And you're like, how does that happen? Well, sometimes if people have a lot of unprocessed developmental trauma in one of their developmental parts, they're going to react strongly, swiftly, and quickly if something like that gets activated in them. So the concept of the healthy adult was really so that somebody wanting to heal from developmental trauma can actually refer to themselves when they're making the healthier choices as, oh, that's my healthy adult. So it's pivoting from those other parts of self into your healthy adult when it counts. And the process itself is steeped in a journey that gets you to that place where you are capable of pivoting. So, we have like the relational circle boundaries that some of you, I can see names on here, and I know a few of you have done those, and those are huge for people to complete. And that's an internal boundary process. We have an attach module that helps you understand attachment and how people attach to one another, and we also have true vitality, which is about food, movement, and mindset. And that comes at the very end of the core curriculum. So people with an eating disorder or people that have some unhealthy relationship with food can understand why until they start thinking that they have a problem with food. Like if we can help them understand why and get underneath there as they're being enlightened to shift this relationship, then it can really, really, really make a huge difference for them. So, is any of this making sense? I'm getting thumbs up. I'm so happy to answer questions, to have a conversation. Oh.
Well, Lori Jean, I'll jump in because I just love where you have taken your life journey. I really appreciate that you talked about your own trauma and how that then created this desire to really help people reattach to themselves in a healthy way. I know you don't want it to be an infomercial, but I really kind of do. And it's only because of the profound work that I've seen you do. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about this, the trauma that gets locked in our bodies at these different ages, right? Like different types of trauma, how you create a space for people to start to actually heal that. And I also want to say, I am so grateful to hear you talk about the overdiagnosing or the, over assessing and under treating. You and I are singing that same, that same song, not because there's anything inherently wrong with the diagnosing, but because, as you said, it usually stops there, or we label someone. And so what I want to put into the conversation is there's a huge conversation in our field, mental health, eating disorder, substance use disorder, about trauma. We're starting to recognize the importance of trauma work, but I noticed that a lot of people are still in some ways kind of afraid to touch it. And so I know I brought a lot of different topics, and one of the ways that I've loved working with clients is when they're ready to do that work to send them to you. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what actually happens in order to start healing trauma, and maybe what clinicians can do and how they can partner with you, or anything you want to say about that. Because what I hear people saying a lot is we're trauma informed, right? That's the new buzzword. But what does that mean, right? What really happens when a person is in front of us and they're presenting with a lot of trauma? So I know that was a lot, but I'd love to hear anything you have to say about that.
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind is that, let me think about the best way to say this. So treating trauma is key. How you treat trauma, I believe, is different, because what is trauma, right? Like a lot of people go through traumatic events. Sometimes they're victims to trauma. Sometimes they're perpetrators of trauma. There's, trauma kind of is now a universal language. I think trauma is a universal language, but what seems to be consistent with a lot of people, I think people don't touch it because people are actually afraid that the person's too fragile. And one of the things that is great about Pivot is we don't look at Pivot through the lens of psychology. Pivot is really through the lens of energy. And so when we talk about trauma, we're just trying to get people to start talking about what's really going on. You know, when you look at like shame and the great work that Brene Brown has done, you know, shame is one of the lowest levels of consciousness. And people want humiliation and elimination come up with shame. Like, I just want out of here. That's why a lot of people will be in so much shame, they'll end up committing suicide. And I think that, you know, the most important thing is allowing and providing the space and the place for people to talk about what's really going on and breathe in it. It's not to fix it real quick. It's not to shift it real quick. You know, that's why at our 5-day intensive, we spend the first 2-3 days going down and open and deep and in, and then letting people sit in that, breathe in that through yoga and meditation, be in that at the dinner table, talk about it in through the lens of the developmental psychology so they can start understanding. Because it's not universal. It's not this happens as a child, this happens as a teen. It's whatever happened to you is what's important. And when it happened to you has significance in why you are the way you are today and what you're doing and how you're reacting today. So I think it's really important just to, you know, say that, you know, to me, one of the best books out there to this day is Bessel van der Kolk's Your Body Keeps the Score. It's not an easy read. For me, that's because I'm from West Virginia. But for a lot of you, I'm totally joking. It was a great read for me, and I loved every second of it. And the reason why is because he really emphasizes how just because we tell ourselves something up here doesn't mean that we're following it down in our body. Our actions don't follow it. You know, we talk about relational alignment at Pivot, and that's about getting people to have the ability to have good rational thinking, a high level of emotion intelligence, and then take the right action. That's when we say think, feel, and do at Pivot. We're pivoting to that higher level of consciousness as the healthy adult when it counts. So when you get activated, like to this day, I could have, okay, I'll be vulnerable here. So I could get a phone call. I could see that maybe a couple of my friends were getting together and maybe I didn't get the invite. For like 30 seconds, I can feel that little girl in me that had to move around a lot when I was young and always prove myself to be accepted. I can feel that part of me get hurt. And so my healthy adult today can discern over what to do about that really quick so that I don't like get angry at people. I don't like call somebody up. I don't like ghost people. Not that I would do any of that today, but this is what people do. Because the little girl that lives in me gets hurt easily and she wants to just push people away. And if I was to do that, then I wouldn't be able to connect securely. So I have to discern whether or not I want to go in there and correct that. So, you know, if it's somebody that's a good friend, somebody that I can trust, my healthy adult has to show up and say, hey man, you know, can I have a conversation with you? And it's a little uncomfortable for me, but I don't want to carry resentment. You know, and I'm okay whatever the answer is. So if it's somebody I really trust, then I've got to step in there and show up for myself. So at least if they didn't want to invite me, that's okay. Because I don't need to be invited to every place. You know, I'm Sagittarius. I have a lot of energy. Sometimes it's a little too much. But the bottom line is that, you know, people get to choose, and guess what? So do I. But if I don't go in and take care of that little girl when she gets activated, then guess what I used to do is that teenager would go find some guy to take that little girl in his arms and tell her that everything was okay. And guess where that ended up? That's not love addiction. That's attachment dysregulation. So anyway, did I answer some of your questions? Awesome. Do we have any other questions?
We don't have any questions yet. Let's see. Oh, Shannon.
Jeremy, don't forget about me.
Yeah, go ahead, Shan.
I'm raising my hand. No, I'm just kidding.
I feel so bad.
Lori Jean, I just wanted to ask you to speak a little bit. I know, like, familiar a little bit with the attachment process and disorder, dysregulation the work that you do around that. Can you just talk a little bit about how that, like, how you apply that, like, specifically to families? Like, when I think about Glass House, and I think about all the families that I work with substance and mental health use, mental health disorders, I think about the work you're saying, like, on an individual level, but there's a way that it relates in the family dynamic. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit but so people can see the family piece, because I think that's such a key resource that we don't have very much of. And I want people to be able to relate to how that works.
Absolutely. So, and let's refer to it as, say, a family that has a loved one in treatment. Okay, so we have like context for a storyline. So say there's somebody in treatment, and it's like their second treatment center, and they're just maybe have some unprocessed trauma, and maybe has been having some behaviors that cause the family great concern, and so this person's in treatment. So the family has got this one loved one in treatment, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. Well, where pivot can be super helpful is that going into the family and having all the family members do their pivot process, they can understand what it's going to actually take to attach to that person securely when they come home, so they don't have unrealistic expectations, and everybody's on the same page and very clear about what to expect. And typically what happens is when we go in and work with families, we uncover that some of the reason why that person's in treatment is because of these other unlooked at, boxes unchecked that are actually happening in the family system. So like you look at like a bulimia or a porn addiction or something like that, and typically there's somebody back home that controlled and helicoptered and manipulated for a long period of time. And if that person and then the person in treatment don't learn how to attach more securely, that is the gateway for relapse right there, just that one relationship. So when we can go into the family system and get everybody to have the same language, so everybody has like the same goal, which is individualized for that particular family system, it's not a one size fits all, then they can take a look at having more success and coming from a place of reality. So those expectations are realistic. Because I think what happens with families is that there's not a process that goes in and has them do their own individual work alongside while their family member is. There's great family programs out there. Please don't take this as I'm saying that there's not. There's wonderful family programs, but sometimes these other family members are actually the key. They hold the key to being able to have this person have a successful treatment. And if they have a problematic attachment wound, then typically that's going to get activated once again. It's kind of like, what is the expectation? How can you look at yourself from a whole perspective? What is the relationship that you want to have going back? Because if it's somebody that has all this resistance to not doing their quote addiction unquote, and then they go home to all this resistance, but it was the resistance and controlled environment that got them into the drug in the first place. If they don't see that and have a simple way, simple is our superpower. If they don't have a simple way of connecting their own dots within their family system, then they can't actually see what's going on. Does that make sense, Shannon?
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. So we have a question, Lori Jean, in the Q&A, and it says, do you have any advice for people with an eating disorder?
Do I have any advice? Well, I don't give advice unless I know a lot more information, because I don't want to give the wrong advice. If somebody has disordered eating, if somebody is using food excessively as a way to manage and tolerate their feelings, then I think, first of all, you need to take a look at what caused that. What's underneath that? You know, when I was a little girl, I would steal peanuts from my stepfather's stash. And it was the only thing that I could do. It's the only thing I could do to have like one up him. Now I was 5 years old, so nobody get too excited. But I was stealing his peanuts, and you know, so later in life, when my mom's alcoholism got really bad, I started sneaking food. And then I started feeling like I was fat, which led to about a year of, you know, some disordered eating. And looking back on that, it wasn't about the food. It was about the attachment wound that hadn't been treated. I was using the food as a way to manage and tolerate my feelings. So if somebody's anorexic, somebody's bulimic, somebody's binging, you know, all of those types of disordered eating in my book have usually come from a different place. And then sometimes people will flip, just like people flip with attachment, you know, or they'll get, you know, in their child, maybe they, you know, maybe there was no complications with food. Maybe when they were a teenager, they started purging because they wanted to look good. And then when they were an adult, they just started not eating so they could fit in. And then later they sit in an office about this behavior that's completely opposed to one another, and all their relationships are opposed to one another. And then they're diagnosed with borderline. And then we're back at square one again. So I don't mean to not answer the question, but by gosh, I'd rather honor that person. I need to know a little bit more information, but sometimes it's really not about the food.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys, do we have any other questions that you feel like asking at this time? I'm just trying to like absorb all this information. This has been amazing. Let's see. Maria says, wow, I'm so glad to be a part of this program and hear Lori Jean and all that she is sharing. Thank you. Oh, it's awesome.
That's sweet. Yeah.
And Lori Jean, did you already talk about how Glass House does work? I mean, it's not, this webinar series is a resource, right, at large for the community. So we're all just bringing different resources from all over the place for people's basically healing resources. So did you talk about what, like, I know we talked, okay, Glass House, we talked about Pivot, but did you actually talk about what Glass House is and like how you host workshops there, or what your work looks like? I don't think I heard details on that.
Yeah, if you go to lovetopivot.com, everything is now housed under one location. And the pivot process is really what we're teaching, and you can get to it in multiple ways. You can join a pivot tribe for only $60 a week and be put into a small group. You can get your own individual coach for $120 a week. You can work with one of our master advocates. They're people that are certified in relationship, life, and recovery coaching. Or you can take a deep dive into your own process and come to the Glass House and do a 5-day intensive. So we also do custom personalized pivots. So like, you know, this morning I worked for 5 hours with a local family here, and I went to their home and I helped them understand what was going on and mind mapped this process for them so they could get started. So, you know, we can really design whatever you need. And we don't try to be all things to all people, but if it's somebody that you feel needs this kind of work, we will absolutely, you know, figure out a way to make it happen. You know, but the Glass House really is a deep dive into the pivot process. And sometimes we'll do what we run intensives there every other week. And then on the off weeks, we do customized pivots at the location. So sometimes I'll have a couple that will fly in to work with the master advocate from LA just for the day, you know, or we might have somebody from Boston come out for 2 days. You know, we're small, but we're growing, and we're committed.
And if somebody calls you, there's a lot of people that come on our webinar are professionals in the field. And then there's also just people from the communities at large, because that was really our goal. So with keeping that goal in mind, if somebody calls you because they know they need some help and you guys decide, well, it's not really a great fit for Glass House or the pivot work, or at least not initially, I mean, you guys are a great resource for referring out to other professionals in the community based on what people's needs are. Because, I mean, I'm more than a question. I'm just saying this because I know you and I know your work, and I am encouraging people that are listening, you know, if it's not a fit, Lori Jean and the team, Allison and Rosemary and her crew can also make referrals out if pivot or Glass House isn't the work that needs to come first, or isn't, you know, available for whatever reason. So, I mean, I guess I just encourage people to always call and reach out no matter what, because you're just another great resource that we have access to, that has access to even more resources. So
absolutely.
I have a lot of words to say, a very little amount of stuff today.
We have, we refer out a lot, especially for like, you know, drug and alcohol, because we don't treat that. If somebody is actively needs to detox and definitely needs to get, you know, sober, then we would not take them through our process. In fact, we've had people check in that because we're just a workshop intensive, that we've had to, you know, relocate because they weren't, you know, they weren't ready. Like our target is for people who are willing, you know, so you need to be willing. Like and even if you're on the ground, fetal position, that's willing. If you're saying that you're willing, if you have hit a bottom, and even if we get a lot of executives from like Silicon Valley that just want to have better lives. You know, our tag is think better, feel better, live better, for a reason, because sometimes people just were like, oh my God, I can't believe that this dating isn't working for me. You know, we have a dating module, we have a parenting module. In the pivot curriculum itself, it is full bodied. So we have like something for everybody. So it's not just about, oh my God, I'm in crisis. You know, it's not always about crisis. Sometimes it's really just about improving your life and having better relationships, having better success.
Wonderful. And we had a couple questions come in on the chat. So the first one is, what do you mean by your book title, Healthy Adult? What is a healthy adult?
Okay. Whoever wrote that in, if you came in towards the end, I would encourage you to rewatch this, because I think we spoke about it a lot earlier. It's just to answer it briefly. It's really that higher consciousness, that person that lives in all of us, that really wants to make the healthy decision, that's really capable with confidence and clarity and from a place of reality to make that decision from that part of self. You know, pivot is about developmental psychology. So that's what we mean by #healthyadult. And I'm happy whoever wrote that question in, if they want to ping me, if they're send me an email or something at lori@lorijean.com, I'm happy to go into it in more detail.
Awesome. And the next question is, do you allow clients to request to work with you specifically via Zoom, perhaps, if in another state?
If a client wants to work with me specifically, they can. They'll have to sign up for that. It's different. We are doing a lot on Zoom. You know, one of the cool things about Pivot is before COVID, we were already set up. Everything that we do is online. So we're set up for that really nicely with very detailed modules. You know, everything's been working with us this way for a long time. So yes, I'm happy to take on a client. And if I can't, you know, I have other advocates that can do a really, really, really good job with them. But again, it just call me if it's somebody that you feel would work well with me.
Awesome. All right. Well, if do you guys have any other questions, TJ or Shannon, before we kind of conclude here today?
I don't have any, but just want to say thank you so much, Lori Jean. And I know that you're not feeling top notch today, but I'm very grateful for your fabulous energy, which is true every single time I see you.
Aww,
so thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks.
We
Yeah.
need some good energy sometimes up in this place, you know?
Amen.
And same for me too, Lori Jean, just thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do. And as Shannon said, it's really, and you mentioned this, it's really energy, right? Our work really is about working with energy. And I just want to say thank you for doing your own work, which has allowed you to be the energy field that you are. Because I know in the end, you know, if I think about what's the number one thing I can do to help my clients heal their trauma, I can heal my own. And that's a moment to moment. And I know, knowing your story and knowing you, I know that you've done a lot of that deep work yourself. And I just want to say thank you for that, because
Yes.
sometimes that doesn't go acknowledged, right? Like what we have to do as clinicians to actually hold a space for our clients. So I just want to say thank you for your willingness to be in the fetal position, because I know I've been in the fetal position for a long time, crying and sobbing and healing. So thank you. Thank you for everything that you do, but mostly who you be. I don't know if that's proper grammatically, but thank you for who you be.
Love it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much, Lori Jean, for coming on today. I'm like blown out with this one, so I'm going to rewatch it and kind of digest a little bit, I think. But I also want to thank everybody that joined us today. You know, there's so many things you could do on a Tuesday afternoon, and I'm grateful that you decided to spend it with us here today. And Lori Jean, do you want to plug your website one more time in case anyone missed it?
Yeah, it's Love to Pivot, LOVETOPIVOT, lovetopivot.com.
I already got it pulled up on my browser over here. I'm pumped. So that being said, you guys, I did record this webinar. We're going to make sure that it ends up on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll send you the link in case you want to rewatch it. But also what we really encourage you to do is share it with somebody that you feel could use the information. And also, we do the webinar for free every other week. The only fee that we would ask is that you invite other people that you feel would benefit from it, that could use the support. And also, if you're interested in presenting, you can write any of us an email, or you could email us at info@recoverywebinars.com. And that being said, we will go ahead and sign off. Lori Jean, thank you once again for an incredible presentation.
Oh, the last note is we're doing this every other week now, not
That's
every
right.
week. That's our change.
That's the big
So,
change.
Yeah.
So we won't be back next week. Okay. You guys will be back the week after.
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you all so
everybody.
much. See y'all
Drive
later.
safe, Vicki Lucas.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank
Bye,
you, Lori
guys.
Jean.
Bye.